Discover the shocking true story of Linus Grey, the brilliant tech CEO who built a $47 million startup, Grey and Morrison, only to have his world shattered in a single moment. Linus finds his 50-50 business partner, Cameron Morrison, and his fiancée, Rhea Kostas, in a compromising position, actively plotting to commit corporate fraud and force him out of the company. Corporate betrayal and revenge, tech CEO's vengeance, the downfall of a partner and fiancé. Part 1. The Foundation. The city lights of Manhattan stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Grey and Morrison Tech Solutions, a constellation of ambition reflected in glass and steel. Linus Grey stood at those windows often, watching the world below, believing he had built something untouchable. At 34, he had transformed a simple software startup into a mid-market powerhouse, a company worth $47 million and climbing. Tonight, those same lights seemed to mock him. The rain came down in sheets, distorting the cityscape into an impressionist painting of what used to be his life. Linus pressed his palm against the cold window, feeling the vibration of thunder roll through the building's bones. Lightning fractured the sky, and in that moment of terrible clarity, he saw his reflection superimposed over the city, a ghost haunting his own empire. It had been 3 months since that October evening, 3 months since the world he'd carefully constructed came crashing down in the span of 30 seconds. Some moments destroy you so completely that time becomes measured in before and after, and Linus Grey knew he would never again be the man he was before he opened that door. But he was getting ahead of himself. To understand the monster he would become, you had to understand the man he had been. Linus Grey built his first computer at 12, sold his first software at 16, and dropped out of MIT at 19 to chase a vision that kept him awake at night. He was methodical where others were impulsive, patient where others rushed. He believed in loyalty, in handshakes that meant something, in the fundamental goodness of people who worked hard and dreamed bigger. He met Cameron Morrison at a tech conference in Austin. Cameron was everything Linus wasn't. Charismatic, effortlessly social, a natural salesman who could sell ice to Arctic researchers and make them thank him for it. Where Linus built the product, Cameron sold the vision. They were perfect complements, yin and yang, and within 6 months they'd signed a partnership agreement that split the company 50-50. Grey and Morrison was born in a cramped Brooklyn apartment with 4 computers, a coffee maker, and enough ambition to power the entire borough. For 7 years, they built something beautiful. Cameron brought in the clients while Linus perfected the AI-driven analytics platform that would become their flagship product. They worked 100-hour weeks, survived on ambition and cold pizza, weathered 3 near bankruptcies, and emerged stronger each time. They were brothers in all but blood. Then Linus met Rhea Kostas at a gallery opening in Chelsea. She was a vision in emerald silk, dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, discussing a Rothko with such passionate intensity that Linus found himself drawn to her like a moth to flame. She was an art dealer, she explained, specializing in emerging contemporary artists. She found beauty in chaos, meaning in abstraction. "What do you see?" she'd asked him, gesturing at the painting, an intense red canvas with a black void at its center. "A warning," Linus had said, not knowing how prophetic those words would become. She'd laughed, a sound like crystal breaking, and he was lost. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Rhea was sophisticated, cultured, so different from the tech world Linus inhabited. She introduced him to theater, to wine that cost more than his first computer, to a world beyond code and algorithms. She made him feel like more than just an entrepreneur. She made him feel alive. 6 months later, he proposed on a rooftop in Paris, with the Eiffel Tower blazing gold behind them. She said yes with tears streaming down her perfect face, and Linus Grey believed he had everything a man could want. He was wrong. Part 2. The Fracture. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in September. Linus was reviewing quarterly financials when he noticed the irregularity. a series of vendor payments to a consulting firm he didn't recognize. The amounts weren't massive, perhaps $70,000 total over 3 months, but they were consistent, regular, hidden in operational expenses where they might go unnoticed. He called Cameron into his office. Mansfield Consulting? Linus pushed the report across his desk. Who are they? Cameron barely glanced at the paperwork. Advisory firm. I brought them in to evaluate our expansion strategy. Without discussing it with me? You were focused on the new platform updates. I didn't want to distract you. Cameron's smile was easy, practiced. That's why we're partners, right? Division of labor. You build, I strategize. It was reasonable. It made sense. But something in Cameron's too casual posture, the way he didn't quite meet Linus's eyes, set off an alarm in the back of Linus's mind. I'd like to meet with them, Linus said.
Review their recommendations. Absolutely. I'll set something up. Cameron stood, already moving toward the door. We're partners, Linus. Everything I do is for the company. You know that. After he left, Linus sat in his office as the sun set over Manhattan, watching shadows consume the light, and wondered why he felt like he'd just been lied to. The second crack came from Rhea. They were having dinner at their Tribeca loft, a space Rhea had decorated with the same impeccable taste she brought to everything. Minimalist furniture, original artwork, a carefully curated life that looked perfect from every angle. I've been thinking, Rhea said, pushing baby spinach around her plate. Maybe we should postpone the wedding. Linus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Postpone? Not cancel, just delay. She still wouldn't look at him. You've been so stressed with work. I feel like we barely see each other. I want our wedding day to be perfect, and right now... Right now what? Right now you're distracted. We're distracted. I love you, Linus said, reaching across the table for her hand. She let him take it, but her fingers were cold, lifeless. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Some things can't be fixed, Linus. She finally met his gaze, and something in her dark eyes made his blood run cold. Some things are just broken from the start. That night, she slept in the guest room. When Linus asked why, she said she had a headache. He lay alone in their king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt the architecture of his life beginning to shift beneath him. Part 3, The Discovery. October 17th, a Thursday. The day that would divide Linus Grey's life into before and after. He'd been at a meeting with potential investors in Boston, a meeting that ran long, then was cut short when the lead investor had a family emergency. Linus caught an earlier flight back to New York, texting Rhea that he'd be home by 6 instead of 10. She didn't respond. The rain started as his car crossed into Manhattan, a biblical deluge that turned the streets into rivers. He was soaked by the time he reached the office building, his suit clinging to him like a second skin. Most of the staff had left early to beat the weather. The office was dark, silent except for the drum of rain against glass. He almost went straight home. Sometimes Linus wondered how different his life would be if he'd just walked past the conference room with its door slightly ajar, past the sliver of light cutting through the darkness. But he didn't. Something drew him toward that door. Instinct, paranoia, fate, whatever it was, it changed everything. He heard Rhea's laugh first, low, intimate, a sound he recognized from their bedroom. Then Cameron's voice. He suspects something.
This morning he asked about Mansfield again. So we accelerate the timeline. Rhea's voice, cool and controlled. Your attorney says the partnership agreement is airtight? Bulletproof. I can call a vote to remove him as CEO with board support. We trigger the deadlock provision, force a company sale or buyout. He doesn't have the liquid capital to buy me out, but I do. Linus stood frozen in the hallway, his body understanding before his mind could process. And if he fights? Rhea asked. He won't. Linus is a builder, not a fighter. He'll be hurt, devastated even, but he'll walk away, take his payout, start something new. He's talented. He'll land on his feet. You sound almost sorry for him. I am, actually. I do like him. But business is business, and he's become an obstacle to growth. His cautious approach, his ethical hang-ups about data monetization, we're leaving millions on the table to preserve his conscience.
And us? Rhea's voice softened. After? After, we'll have everything. The company, the future, each other. The sound of kissing, movement, clothing rustling. Linus stepped into the doorway. They were pressed against the conference table, Cameron's hands in Rhea's hair, her legs wrapped around his waist. The scene was so perfectly sorted, so absolutely cliché, that Linus might have laughed if his heart wasn't disintegrating in his chest. Rhea saw him first. Her eyes widened, mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. She pushed Cameron away, tugging her dress down, but made no move toward Linus. No apology, no tears, just calculation in her dark eyes, measuring angles and damages. Cameron turned, and for a moment, Linus saw real fear in his partner's face. Then it smoothed into something else. Resignation. Maybe even relief. Linus, Cameron straightened his shirt, ran a hand through his hair. This isn't how long? Linus's voice sounded distant to his own ears, like someone else was speaking with his mouth. Rhea and Cameron exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, a language built from secret intimacy. 6 months, Rhea said finally. She'd regained her composure completely now, standing with her shoulders back, chin raised. Since the company retreat in Colorado. 6 months. The same retreat where Linus had been so proud to introduce Rhea to his team, to share his success with the woman he loved. While he'd been giving presentations about market expansion, she'd been seducing his partner, planning his destruction. And the company? Linus looked at Cameron. That's real? You're actually trying to force me out? It's not personal, Cameron said. It's business. You're brilliant, Linus, but you're holding us back. Your vision is too small, too safe. I need to take this company where it needs to go, and I can't do that with you as an anchor. The company I built. From nothing. We built, Cameron corrected. 50-50, remember. You don't own this any more than I do. Linus stood there in the doorway, water still dripping from his clothes, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. The man who believed in loyalty, in handshakes and fundamental goodness, that man died in the conference room on October 17th. What replaced him was something colder, harder, forged in betrayal and tempered in rage. Okay, Linus said quietly. Cameron frowned. Okay. You want to fight? You want to take my company? Linus smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. Let's see how that works out for you. He turned and walked away, their voices calling after him, explanations and justifications echoing through empty hallways. He didn't look back. That part of his life was over. The war was just beginning. Part 4. Scorched Earth. Linus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment. He'd never think of it as their apartment again, and made lists. Assets, leverage, weaknesses. By dawn, he had a strategy. First, he called Maxwell Chen, the best corporate attorney in New York and an old MIT buddy who owed him a favor. Tell me about the partnership agreement, Maxwell said after Linus explains the situation. Every detail. They spent 3 hours dissecting the document. The news wasn't good. Cameron was right. The agreement did have a deadlock provision that could force a buyout if the partners couldn't agree on company direction. With board support, Cameron could potentially oust Linus as CEO. But, Maxwell said, the word hanging in the air like a lifeline, the provision requires clear documentation of the deadlock, a pattern of fundamental disagreements that prevent company operation. One meeting where you disagree isn't enough. He needs to prove an ongoing, irreconcilable conflict. So I don't give him one, Linus said. I agree with everything. I'm the perfect partner. Well, while I find out exactly what he's been doing behind my back. Linus hired a forensic accountant named Sarah Winters, a woman with the personality of a dental drill and the investigative instincts of a bloodhound. He gave her access to every company record and one directive: find the dirt. She found it. Mansfield Consulting was a shell company owned by Cameron's brother-in-law. The $70,000 in consulting fees had gone straight into Cameron's pocket. But that was just the beginning.
Sarah traced a web of self-dealing that went back 2 years. Kickbacks from vendors, inflated expense reports, even a business development trip to Thailand that involved zero business and extensive development of Cameron's tan.
I love making these videos for you. If you liked this story, then please like, subscribe to my channel, and switch on the notifications for more entertaining stories. Please also leave a comment for any story suggestions.
The total, nearly $300,000 of company money funneled into Cameron's personal accounts. This is fraud, Sarah said, sliding the report across Linus's desk. Clear, prosecutable fraud.
You take this to the board, to the authorities, and he's done. But Linus had learned something in the past week. Revenge wasn't about quick kills. It was about making them feel it. The board meeting was scheduled for November 1st. Cameron had been building his case, talking to board members privately, painting Linus as overly conservative, unable to scale with the company's growth. He'd lined up 3 of the 5 board members to support removing Linus as CEO. Linus let him believe he was winning. The night before the meeting, Linus had dinner with each board member separately. He didn't plead his case or attack Cameron. He simply showed them the forensic accounting report. "I'm not asking you to choose sides," Linus said at each dinner. "I'm just asking you to understand what's at stake. This isn't about vision or leadership styles. This is about integrity." He saved Richard Walsh for last. Walsh was the venture capitalist who'd led their Series B funding, a kingmaker in the tech world. He sat in his Fifth Avenue penthouse, reading Sarah's report, his face growing darker with each page. "Jesus Christ," Walsh muttered. "The arrogant bastard. Does he think we're idiots?" "He thinks he's charming enough to talk his way out of anything," Linus said. "He's probably right." "Not this time." Walsh tossed the report on his coffee table. "You want him out?" "I want him gone. Completely. I want to buy his stake and never see his face again." "That'll cost you. What are you thinking? 20 million? "Whatever it takes." Walsh studied him. "You've changed, Linus. A month ago, you would have tried to talk this out, find a compromise. Now, you want blood." "A month ago, I believed in people," Linus said. "Now, I believe in contracts." Part 5. The Reckoning. The board meeting started at 9 a.m. Cameron arrived early, confident, wearing a new Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Linus's first-year salary. He didn't know that 3 of his board supporters had called him the night before to cancel breakfast meetings, claiming sudden emergencies. The meeting room felt like a courtroom. 6 people around a table. Linus, Cameron, Richard Walsh, and 3 other board members. Janet Morrison, no relation to Cameron, David Park, and Rachel Goldman. Cameron started his presentation, smooth as ever. He talked about market opportunities, aggressive expansion strategies, the need for bold, visionary leadership willing to push boundaries. "What Linus has built is impressive," Cameron said, his smile sympathetic and just slightly condescending. "But to reach the next level, we need someone who isn't afraid to take risks, someone who sees the bigger picture." "Someone like you?" Janet Morrison asked, her tone neutral. "I believe I can take this company where it needs to go, yes." "And where's that?" David Park leaned forward.
"Specifically?" Cameron launched into a detailed growth strategy, and Linus had to admit it was compelling. Aggressive monetization of user data, expansion into emerging markets with questionable privacy laws, partnerships with companies Linus had deliberately avoided due to ethical concerns. "It's a bold vision," Rachel Goldman said when he finished, "potentially very lucrative." Cameron smiled. "Thank you." "Also illegal in at least 4 states, violation of our user privacy agreements, and likely to result in regulatory sanctions and class action lawsuits within 18 months, Rachel continued. She was a Harvard law professor in her spare time, but very bold. Cameron's smile faltered. "That's why we have lawyers, to navigate regulatory—" "Let's talk about navigation," Richard Walsh interrupted. He opened his folder, pulled out Sarah's report. "Specifically, how you navigated $300,000 of company funds into your personal accounts." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Cameron's face went through a fascinating journey: confusion, realization, fear, then anger. That's a creative interpretation of legitimate expenses. Mansfield Consulting is owned by your brother-in-law, Janet Morrison said, reading from her own copy of the report. Want to explain that? Business consulting is fraud, David Park finished. The word you're looking for is fraud. Cameron stood up suddenly, his chair scraping back. This is a setup. Linus fabricated this because he's desperate, because he knows the company has outgrown him. Sit down, Cameron. Walsh's voice could have cut steel. We're not finished. The meeting lasted 3 more hours. Cameron denied, explained, rationalized. His justifications grew increasingly desperate, his charm curdling into bitterness. He accused Linus of jealousy, of manufacturing evidence, of trying to steal the company he'd helped build. Finally, Walsh called for a vote. All in favor of removing Cameron Morrison as partner and member of this board. 5 hands went up. Only Cameron stayed down. Motion passes unanimously, Walsh said. Mr. Morrison, you have 30 days to negotiate a buyout of your shares, or we'll invoke the ethics clause in your partnership agreement and pay you fair market value minus damages. Given the evidence of fraud, damages could be substantial. Cameron's face had gone gray. You can't do this. I built this company. You stole from this company, Janet Morrison said. Get a lawyer, Mr. Morrison. You're going to need one. Cameron looked at Linus, and there was something almost pleading in his eyes. We were brothers, Linus. Partners. 7 years. Doesn't that mean anything? Linus met his gaze without expression. Not anymore. Part 6. Ashes. Cameron hired an aggressive firm and contested everything: the fraud allegations, the buyout terms, even the validity of the ethics clause. His attorneys painted him as a victim of Linus's vindictive manipulation, argued that the so-called fraud was simply aggressive interpretation of expense policies. Maxwell Chen destroyed them methodically. He provided emails showing Cameron had deliberately hidden the Mansfield Consulting relationship, bank records proving the money trail, testimony from vendors about kickback arrangements. It wasn't interpretation, it was theft, documented in excruciating detail. The final settlement came in December. Cameron would sell his 50% stake for $18 million, roughly $5 million below market value. He would sign a non-compete agreement preventing him from starting a rival company for 5 years. He would make no public statements about the company or his departure. Linus paid for it by taking out massive loans against the company, leveraging everything. It was risky, potentially catastrophic if the company faltered. He didn't care. Grey and Morrison would be Grey Technologies, wholly owned, wholly controlled. On the day Cameron signed the papers, they met one final time in Maxwell's office. Cameron looked smaller somehow, diminished. The easy charm was gone, replaced by something harder, more honest perhaps. I hope it was worth it, Cameron said as he signed the last document. Destroying me, was it? Linus thought about the question. About Rhea's betrayal, about 7 years of friendship revealed as a lie, about the naive man he'd been who believed in loyalty. No, he said honestly, but it was necessary. I did like you, you know, Cameron said quietly. For what it's worth, it wasn't all fake. That makes it worse, Linus replied, not better. Rhea came for her things on a Sunday morning in January. She'd moved in with Cameron after everything came out, a decision that surprised no one. Linus had packed her belongings carefully, organized by type, labeled boxes stacked neatly by the door. He'd thrown nothing away, destroyed nothing. That would have been emotional, and he was done with emotion. She looked tired when she arrived, her perfect polish slightly dimmed. Cameron waited downstairs with the moving van, not brave enough to face Linus again. I never meant to hurt you, Rhea said, and maybe she even believed it. Yes, you did, Linus replied. You just didn't mean to get caught. I loved you, maybe, not the way you wanted, but you loved what I represented. Success, stability, a certain kind of life. Linus gestured around the expensive loft. You just found a better version. Cameron's not...
She stopped, bit her lip. Things aren't working out the way we planned. Because he's unemployable? Because no one in the industry will touch him after what I've made sure they know? Linus smiled, and it was not kind. Actions have consequences, Rhea. You should both learn that. She picked up a box, her hands shaking slightly. At the door, she turned back. The man I met at that gallery, he would have forgiven us. He believed in second chances. That man doesn't exist anymore, Linus said. You killed him. Part 7, Phoenix. The industry gossip moved fast. Within weeks, every tech executive in New York knew the story. The unfaithful fiancé, the treacherous partner, the fraudulent scheme. Some details were embellished, others understated, but the core narrative was damning. Cameron Morrison was a thief and a traitor. Job offers dried up. Networking calls went unreturned. His reputation, built over a decade, collapsed like a house of cards. Cameron and Rhea's relationship imploded by February. The stress, the recriminations, the reality of their situation without the cushion of money and status, it corroded whatever they'd had. The breakup was apparently spectacular, played out over screaming matches in Cameron's rent-controlled studio apartment in Queens, a significant downgrade from his previous life. Rhea moved to Los Angeles, chasing gallery connections that never materialized. Cameron took a job at a second-tier consulting firm in Newark, making a third of his previous salary. His career trajectory permanently derailed. Linus heard these things through the grapevine. He didn't seek the information out, but people told him anyway, thinking he'd want to know. Maybe thinking he'd take satisfaction in their suffering. He felt nothing. Grey Technologies flourished under Linus's sole leadership. Without Cameron's pressure for aggressive monetization, Linus doubled down on what made their software valuable: accuracy, reliability, ethical data practices. He hired aggressively, bringing in top talent attracted by the company's renewed focus on innovation over profit margins. The loans he'd taken to buy out Cameron were paid off in 18 months. The company's valuation tripled. By the second year, they were preparing for an IPO. Linus moved through it all like a ghost in his own life. He worked 16-hour days, made brilliant strategic decisions, built an empire. But there was something missing, some essential humanity that had burned away in that conference room on October 17th. His employees respected him, but feared him too. He was fair, but cold, brilliant, but remote. He never yelled, never showed anger, but there was something in his eyes that kept people at a distance. He dated occasionally, women introduced by well-meaning friends, algorithmic matches from apps he built himself. Nothing stuck.
He couldn't trust anyone enough to let them close, and he knew it. Part 8. Haunting. 3 years after that October evening, Linus stood at the same floor-to-ceiling windows where our story began, watching lightning fracture the Manhattan sky. Grey Technologies occupied 3 floors now, employed over 200 people, was valued at just under $100 million. He had won, utterly, completely, decisively. So why did victory taste like ashes? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, for whatever it's worth. C. Linus stared at the message for a long time, his reflection ghost-like in the rain-streaked glass. He thought about responding, about offering forgiveness or acceptance or whatever Cameron was seeking. He thought about the man he'd been, the one who believed in second chances. He deleted the message. Maxwell Chen found him there an hour later, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He'd become Linus's closest friend, though friend might be too strong a word. More like a fellow survivor, someone who understood the world's fundamental cruelty. Saw the news, Maxwell said, handing Linus a glass. Congratulations, Forbes 30 under 40, you made it. Did I? Linus took a drink, barely tasting it. You're rich, powerful, successful. You destroyed your enemies and built an empire. That's victory in any language. Then why does it feel like I lost something? Maxwell was quiet for a moment, considering. Because you did. You lost the person you were. The question is whether what you gained was worth it. Linus thought about his company, his success, his perfect revenge. He thought about Cameron working in obscurity, Rhea's failed dreams, his own hollow triumph. I don't know, he admitted. That's the hell of it, Maxwell said. None of us ever really know. They stood together at the window, watching the storm rage over Manhattan, two ghosts haunting a monument to ambition. Epilogue, years later. 5 years after the betrayal, Grey Technologies went public. The IPO was wildly successful, raising $300 million and valuing the company at nearly $1 billion. Linus Grey became, on paper, one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs under 40 in America. He stood on the trading floor of the NYSE, watching his company's symbol light up the boards, surrounded by employees and investors and well-wishers. Everyone wanted to shake his hand, to be associated with this triumph. He smiled for the cameras and said the right things about vision and innovation and the future. Inside, he felt nothing. That evening, alone in his penthouse apartment, larger than the Tribeca loft, more expensive, just as empty, Linus poured himself a drink and opened his laptop. He'd kept files on Cameron and Rhea over the years, unable to help himself. Checking periodically on their diminished lives, like a man poking at a wound. Cameron Morrison was working for a startup in Austin now, middle management, decent but unremarkable. His LinkedIn profile showed a man who'd aged badly, gray creeping into his hair, lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and regret. Rhea had married a dentist in Santa Monica. Her Facebook page showed a carefully curated life of beach photos and wine bars, the glossy surface of suburban satisfaction. But Linus had learned to read between the lines, to see the desperate performance of happiness in every post. They were alive but diminished, functioning but broken, exactly as he'd planned. He closed the laptop and walked to his window. He always came back to windows, to looking down on the city from heights he'd climbed. He thought about calling someone, but who? He had employees, not friends, allies, not companions. He'd built walls so high that nothing could reach him, not betrayal, but also not love. His phone showed a notification, a dating app match. A beautiful woman named something beginning with K or C or some other letter that didn't matter. He could message her, go through the motions, perform normalcy for a few dates before the inevitable ending. He dismissed the notification. Outside, the city gleamed with possibility, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each one touched by hope and pain and the messy business of being human. Linus Grey looked down on it all from his tower of success, his fortress of achievement, and knew with absolute certainty that he had won everything except what actually mattered. He raised his glass to his reflection in the dark window, a ghost haunting a life that looked perfect from every angle. To victory, he whispered to the empty room. The city lights didn't answer. They never did. In the end, Linus Grey got everything he wanted. He destroyed his enemies, built his empire, proved his worth to a world that had betrayed him. But on quiet nights, when the city slept and he lay awake in rooms that had never become homes, he wondered if the man who believed in loyalty and second chances might have been happier than the monster who learned to trust no one. Some victories, after all, are indistinguishable from defeat. And some wounds, once opened, never truly heal. The end.
I love making these videos for you. If you liked this story, then please like, subscribe to my channel, and switch on the notifications for more entertaining stories. Please also leave a comment for any story suggestions.